Welcome to Challenging ParadigmX. My name is Xerxes Waschengear. In my podcast, I interview people who challenge the status quo. Amongst other things, in this episode, we will talk about sex and business, and if, for example, the sexual energy at the workplace can be transformed into boosting your business and career. We'll talk about if the corona pandemic will lead to massive shifts for humanity, and also about the challenges that we are facing with artificial intelligence and who should decide about the future of AI and eventually the future of humanity. My guest today is Bobbi Bidochka. Amongst other things, Bobbi works for a tech company, runs her own events company, is the vice president of a third company, and is just about to publish her book, Sex and Business. So if you're interested in these topics and this multi-potentialite personality, stay tuned. So hi, here's Xerxes, and today I'm here with Bobbi Bidochka. It's great to have you here, Bobbi.
Thanks, my pleasure.
And yes, could you please introduce yourself and tell us who you are?
Sure. So my name is Bobbi Bidochka, and I'm a multi-potentialite and someone who just gets themselves involved in a multitude of projects. I'm tech by day and Imagine Ideation by night, which is like a connector, rethinking, human interactions type of consulting work. I'm a writer. I'm involved in Human Impact Lab. Just kind of do a bunch of things that hopefully, move the world forward in a better way.
And so please tell us, why do you do what you do?
It sounds a bit cliche, but it's really about impact. Like what I'm looking to do is just do things that go a bit beyond just helping people, but really actually have the chance that can change paradigms or change the way that systems operate or influence major decision making. That's the ultimate goal, and so I'll work on that incrementally up until. But the idea is to do things that kind of make the world a better place.
And you do this in various different jobs, in various different positions, in various different projects?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So we're just going to try to hit it on all fronts.
Would you like to give us some background on that?
Sure. So, during the day I work for a tech company, and their main business is getting more research out of universities and out into the world that can have a greater impact. Big technologies, not just apps or anything like that, but also, so my business, Imagine Ideation, this is about how can we connect people better? A lot of people go to events or conferences and sort of leave a bit wanting more and didn't really get to the people that they wanted to get to. A lot of the content that's at conferences for the most part is content that you can get, anywhere. It's available out there. So people are really going more for the relationships. And so I find that a lot of these types of events, not everybody's a natural networker. Not everybody knows how to find the right people in the room and build those relationships that actually has something meaningful afterwards. And two, just general introductions and connections through people, facilitating those people who need some help or, just have an offering and how can I connect better? How can we connect better with people? So that's a big part of the business there. And, my book, Sex and Business, is, you might not think that, these two words necessarily go together, but they actually really do. And this book is really meant to, it's my reaction from the Me Too movement, but really I talk a lot about, I'm kind of calling into question how people form identity and the usefulness or not of these identities and how they impede or impact how we react to certain things like the Me Too movement and feminist movements and all of these kinds of things. There's also how people approach sex, not as intercourse, but meaning, all of the other benefits that sort of come from sexual energy that can actually positively impact your business or your career, is you can channel these energies, and they're flow triggers, things like that. And so just people, I think they're trying to like cut the whole sex relationship thing like right out of the workplace, which is impossible because you cannot fight biology, and better to leverage the positive side of things. And so there's a lot of discussion about power relations and all that kind of stuff. So that's I think quite paradigm shifting entirely, because people really have, like, sex is both, it's like what Foucault talks about, sex is both like whoever controls the conversation has the power over the topic. And so, sex is both taboo and yet talked about in everything, every music, every video, every movie. It's everywhere, and yet people, so this is a very interesting dichotomy. And when all those topics come into play, like Me Too movement and or anything else actually that's really matters, people tend to take a binary point of view, which I think is like the wrong approach to almost everything. There's a concept called gray thinking, which is you can have conflicting opinions. So I can think two opposite opinions about the same thing, and that doesn't mean that I don't stand for something. It just means like that there's it's I would argue that it's almost nearly impossible to fully have a binary point of view on anything. But I think people grab onto that because it attaches to identity. So that's pretty interesting to me. And then also the Human Impact Lab, which we're sort of in the middle of transitioning what we're going to do with it, but it originally started as a climate sort of awareness type of group, but we'd like to sort of transition into doing more meaningful practical projects that involved anything. I mean, the criteria is we will basically help businesses or ideas move forward so long as they have some type of positive impact to the world or to humans or what have you. So it's pretty broad, the scope right now, but we just feel like we want to take more action on that, on furthering different ideas and concepts. So yeah, that's how all of that is kind of manifesting right now.
So you're doing really a lot of things and different things.
Yeah.
I think between the first and the second, I saw a connection in the sense of identity and connection, perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if it's the same with the third project. Let's go maybe into the first one. I would like to talk about all of them a bit at least. So,
Sure.
especially now when it comes to the first project that you talked about, where it is about events. So you organize events, or how can I understand it? You consult on how to organize events. What is it? What you're doing there?
All of it. So we organize events, so we can do the whole turnkey, start to finish thing. But what we don't just like set up a venue and bring food and sell tickets and that's that. It's a much more involved process. The events that we like to participate in are ones where you're bringing a lot of different stakeholders. Usually the content is a bit more meaty, maybe of an academic nature, or just something a little bit more substantial. And also, sitting down with our partners, just working out in advance what it is that you want to achieve with this event. So it's really thought through, and then you come up with what the outcomes that you really want to have. How will we achieve those? How are we going to measure that? And then how do you tell this story throughout? Everything needs to be weaved in, like the catering, the venue, the content, everything that people are seeing and doing needs to tell the same story. So this is very much the experience and the transformation. Like the idea here is that people are coming and they're going to be transformed. And I don't mean like in a religious way. I mean like they've come to learn and experience, and even just by osmosis, by being in the environment, they are absorbing the messaging. They are learning something. So this is the idea. from start to finish, but we also consult with people. We help facilitate introductions, have smaller meetings. Sometimes the meetings are small. We're just working out, helping people whiteboard ideas, things like that. And yeah, I mean, right now it's we cannot meet physically, so one might think that that impacts the business, and it does to a certain extent, but we're noticing there's still that quite a lot can be done, and I'm surprised actually at how well I am still able to sort of make friends and make connections digitally and get to know people and feel like, wow, I'm somehow this that thing that needs to happen sort of face to face is happening virtually. I think it's really interesting. I mean, maybe it has to do with the fact that people are a little bit less guarded. They're at home, maybe they have their pajamas on. People are seeing their kids, their cats, and whatever, and so there's a bit, maybe it's just that is allowing the connection to happen despite not being, I'm a huge proponent of face to face. Anybody I can have a meeting with, I don't want to have a phone call. It's like the worst way. I really want to be in front of someone. I really want to like get close. And there's actually neuroscience that scientifically proves, like when you and I are sitting beside each other and we're like super engaged and we're talking, that our brains actually like literally start to sync. And so of course you miss that virtually, and like I feel it when I have a really great connection meeting someone. I'm like, I feel it. This is why, and this feeling is why that sort of drives me to help people do better networking and help people have better events, because this to me is like magic. This, like, nothing gets my blood pumping and my all the chemicals flowing better than this. And so, if you can just amplify that and maximize and make more and optimize, then this is what we should be doing.
So I would be very interested in what your take is now with the current situation when it comes to exactly that, events where people connect and perhaps even connect on a deep basis, get to know each other, start to talk about new things, create new projects, and so on and so forth. I personally work as a speaker as well. And for me, really, this is a big question. How will the future of events be? Will there be events? And how will they be? Will there be more virtual events? And so on and so forth. So I'm sure you have thought about this in the last couple of weeks a lot.
Yeah, definitely.
And what projection do you have, or what ideas do you have? And would it be possible, in your opinion, to create similar types of deep connections, although people do not meet in person?
I think so. I have a few opinions about that. I mean, definitely the events industry itself, it will change. It will change because now that everybody's sort of been forced online, now there's systems set up. And so once people realize that, oh, we can kind of run this event or do certain things online, where they probably were thinking of it before, but now it's getting a bit, embedded. So people are getting used to it. People are doing it. They're sort of working out some of the kinks. And this will go on through the next year or so, like up until, for sure, up until there's a vaccine and this is like really sorted out. This will go on like this for a while. Having said that, there will still be in-person events in the future. What I think will happen, and it'll look like there's certain events that have a really high ticket to go to, and people fly, from all over the world to go to certain events, and so they can get rather costly. So I think what some of those bigger events will do is they'll do like a hybrid. So they'll have an in-person version. I also think and hope that people like Zoom or other companies are trying to come up with a better product that will facilitate that. As a massive shift, I completely think that there will be no massive shift in people. Is it like the way that events will do this hybrid thing? It's just because now they've found a new revenue stream, and they've been forced to sort of put it into operation now. So why not continue and make money off of it later? I don't think that there's going to be any major shift in how humanity operates after 2 to 3 years. Once the market bounces back and everybody's kind of got back to normal, people will forget about this. Like 2, 3 months hanging out at home, for the most part, this is not enough to affect change, right? This is, there are some people who are suffering. There are some, like, frontline workers are seeing things on a daily basis that, they can never unsee. But I would say for the most part, for most people in the Western world, what am I doing? I'm just hanging out at home. Like, I'm not seeing any tragedy. I'm not like this. That's pretty hard to affect massive change in people's mindsets on how they think about the environment or how they think about the economy, when all I had to do was just hang out at home for 2, 3 months. Like, it's just not enough. So my prediction is after 2 to 3 years, people will, this will just be a blip on, it's like, oh yeah, remember when that was weird, huh? And then they will continue on with their capitalist endeavors, and we will have both fully smogged China and no changes in recycling practices. Like, it's just, that's my prediction.
Okay.
Yeah. I'd love to say, oh, humanity, we're all gonna be like better people, and we're gonna start addressing mental health better because of all this. And yeah, no, we won't. It's gonna take a
Maybe,
lot more than that.
I hope it's not like this.
Mm,
I think it really depends on how bad it will still get. I mean, I don't think 3 months staying at home makes a big change. But let's see what happens with the economy. So,
yeah,
and I
yeah.
think that will, I personally think that will make a difference if the economy is hit really hard or if it's just another recession.
Mm-hmm.
And I think
Yeah,
if it's hit really hard, there might be chance for true deep transformation. This is my personal opinion. But
yeah. I think,
otherwise,
like,
I'm fully with you.
yeah, it's on an individual level, people can make their change, and people are there's no doubt that there's the hunger to do that. If you take a look at the transformation economy and how much money and time people put into that, there's definitely a desire to do that. But systematically and, like, habitually, you got to really have something hit you hard as a society to make a massive change in a quick way. Like, things happen incrementally over time. I mean, think about, there was no such thing as recycling or what have you 20, 30, 35 years ago. But to affect a massive change for an entire society or country or nation, or, whatever you want to call it, your collective,
The world.
yeah, you really got to have, like, something that hits you hard. Yeah.
And I personally think it's not the coronavirus. I think it could be what comes after the coronavirus. But this is what I wanted to say before, basically. So I'm with
Yeah.
you when you say absolutely with you 100%, just staying at home for 3 months. Yeah, we will think back to that. But it really depends on how hard the economic crisis will hit. And I think this is perhaps the biggest chance for us as a humanity
Mm-hmm.
to initiate a big transformational process.
Mm-hmm.
But this would only happen if we are talking about a bigger crisis than in the 1930s. And we will
Yeah.
see. If it
Yeah. That's
if
it.
it does happen, then this is one of the biggest chances for humanity. And if it doesn't happen, I mean, there will be a lot of painful losses in many ways, and a lot of poverty and problems for
Mm-hmm.
many people, and so on and so
Mm-hmm.
forth.
Yeah.
But at the other hand, I think it would be a major chance for humanity to make a shift towards another system, basically.
Yeah. I
So
mean,
maybe
it's the irony of it all, where I mean, and maybe it's a bit controversial to say, but you don't want to wish for tragedy, but at the same time, it's like, that that's what it's going to take to affect change. So it's like, it's like with kids, do you want to, if you keep saving them from their fall, they sort of never really learn from the pain.
exactly, and it's like in everyone's personal life, because we as people, as individual people, we usually only change if we saw some had some
Mm-hmm.
major painful experience. In our comfort zone, most people don't change. So I'm absolutely with you. I personally think we have two major challenges in this decade at least. One is the climate crisis, or I would actually say the environmental crisis, because I don't think it's just the climate.
Agreed.
And the other thing is artificial intelligence and how it is a challenge to us as humanity, in the sense of that it raises the question what it means to be human. So I personally think that is that these are the two major challenges. So, and now we have this crisis through the corona pandemic, and at least one of these two crises might be actually also really affected, and that's the climate and the environmental issue through this pandemic as well, indirectly.
Oh yeah.
So maybe you want to give us some more background on these projects that you're working on, or what you're doing, if you can. I don't know in which stage they are, if you are able to talk about the projects, or at least what the aim is and in which direction it generally goes.
I mean, for Human Impact Lab, it started out as environmental and climate change focused, and they had like a ticker going on their website, sort of counting down to a particular time when, I don't know, it's going to be too late or something like that. This was before my time, and so, but then sort of the leadership, they ended up going working on different projects, and so with one of the original founders, now I've joined up with him, Samad, and we're going to try to sort of take it to the next level by, like I said, taking on different projects that have some kind of impact. We're super excited about the direction that's going to go. And when you think about a circular economy, that both feeds in with to environmental aspects as well, and that also connects to more local supply chain and things like that. So I think it's that could be interesting if we could figure out a decent model on how that could be implemented in a rather quick way. Then that's something, a toolkit can be built, and other places can replicate that with any hope. And sort of we need to sort of run these two infrastructures at the same time. Like, there's people can't afford necessarily to always, there's a reason why not everybody shops organic, because it's more expensive, and it's more expensive because of labor laws in certain countries. So that's going to be a hurdle to overcome in different kinds of ways. So there's that. And then, sustainable farming, that's, both a health concern and an environmental concern. So figuring out how to adjust that, because, the meat production is one of, if not the biggest contributor to greenhouse or to carbon emissions. So, that's an issue too. And yeah, it all connects there. But for the AI thing, that's super interesting. I mean, I work for a tech company, and so I'd say a good 3/4 of the tech companies that we've recently started have an AI component to them, although AI is not as of a real thing as people think it is in their imaginations. Like, it's more still really at the machine learning, deep learning stages. AI is the way that people envision AI who don't have a tech background isn't really where it's at now. I don't think people need to be too concerned about robots taking over the world in any time. Most especially because, like you said, the AI we are machine learning, and AI is only as good as the how we train it. And so there's a woman I know, has a chatbot company in California, and they've done a pretty massive study of how people treat chatbots. And so all the communication that you have with the chatbot then teaches the chatbot, right? So as we use it, it learns. The problem is that most of the time we are abusing chatbots. We are abusing Siri. And so the sheer amount of abuse that we display to our digital counterparts, I guess you could call them, is a disturbing reflection of humanity, in fact. So, we'd like to think that we are civilized and, respectable, nice people, but the data doesn't show that. So that's a bit of a concern, just as just normal, daily behaviors, never mind trying to teach humor and other types of things to machine learning. Is there's a lot of parts of the human that will be very difficult to train.
In my TEDx talk, also I talked about the rules and the paradigms that we program into artificial intelligence. I personally compare it to like the Ten Commandments. We humans, I usually say, we are coined by our religions, even if we are not religious, because we grow up in societies that a culture is basically a continuation of a process, a societal process over a certain amount of time. And a few cultures are a few thousand years old, a few cultures are maybe a few hundred years old. And usually the rules and the paradigms were always defined by religion. So even if I'm not a religious person, even if I'm an atheist, still I'm coined by my society that I've grown up with. So with this background, I always say the rules and the paradigms that we program into the AI or train AI with is basically what the result of artificial intelligence is. Do you see it? Is basically what you said, just like what I'm reflecting now, or
It
would you
is. I
see it
mean,
in a different way?
you're right. It's the. I mean, if you even look at just Google searches and how people, so anything that gets programmed is programmed from a biased point of view. And so if for the longest time the people who were doing the programming were white Christian males. And so that those systems got set up to reflect, when you make a connection, when I say doctor, you think white man. When you say nurse, you think white woman, and so there's teacher, all these, because it's all about connections, right? So they have to keep making all these words connect to one another in the way that they think that people think, so that when you type in something, you get back the results that you're looking for. And it's the same for everything. So all of the way that all the data gets input and the way that things get programmed are from a biased point of view, and it's not from malice. That's just how it is. And this will shift when now we're doing, there's a lot of programs that, getting done in China or getting done in India, and it's the same thing. So they will have their biases that gets put into the system, and it will all reflect. And so it's true that whatever you're sort of brought up with in your belief systems will this shows up in data. Is not neutral. There is no neutral machine learning. They can try their best, but and having diverse teams helps tremendously if you can get that from the beginning. But already a lot of the systems are already built with the bias. And so there's really no such thing as neutral anyway.
And do you believe that it would make a difference for the future also? I mean, there is these scenarios that you also referred to before, that artificial intelligence will take over, that people think that we are maybe near to the stage and so on and so forth. Do you personally think that how we program artificial intelligence today, tomorrow, will also have an effect how artificial intelligence, if it ever reaches the point of superintelligence, singularity, however you might want to call it, if that will make a difference, how we basically, which paradigms, which rules, which dogmas we program into them, or do you think it won't
I mean,
make
that's
no
a big
difference at all?
that's a tough one, because if you just look at the United Nations, so this is supposed to be, a group of nations coming together to try to agree on certain things, but getting even any type of, declarations or ratified throughout, because different people have different perspectives of what they think are good and bad things and right and wrong and the thing to do, not to do. And so what will happen is the people who say have power or money will end up being the creators of the system. There's also this saying, it's the victors who write history. And so it will be those systems that get built with those beliefs in them, because those were the people who had access to do it, to have the money to do it. They won't reflect all humans at all times, and I'm not even sure that that would be a good idea anyways. It's I mean, maybe I'm both an idealist and a bit of a, I don't know what to call it. I mean, so I do believe in constructivism, where, you know, we are creating our own systems. Nothing is really set, but at the same time, you know, I think we're under the illusion that we are a civilized society, and really what keeps us glued together and acting appropriately is a mix of religion and law. Because if we didn't have those two systems set up, it would just result back to, you know, chaos and very animalistic. You know, I mean, you could just look throughout history. Whenever those two things break down, and people just start getting violent and going crazy, and so it's in us, and I think it's, if we can come to terms and admit that when we're creating these types of systems, then we can be more careful about trying to build systems that reflect some type of morality and ethics in them, in the hope, if you can program that in. I mean, you can't deprogram the animal in us, but maybe we can program in some higher moral, ethical ground. But it would need to be super intentional, because if they don't do that and they just sort of make a reflection of us without admitting, you know, all of our downfalls, then what you will get is a very nasty it'll be a nasty world. I think human beings aren't all that nice all the time, unfortunately.
Well, I mean, it is said, I don't know how it is exactly termed, but I think in the Bible it says God has created men and women in his or her own image. So this is basically what's happening with artificial intelligence, in a way.
Yeah.
I wonder, from your perspective, who do you think should decide how we go forth in this respect? Like how we program artificial intelligence, how a long-term perspective of developing artificial intelligence should be.
Yeah, another big question. It's a bit of a conundrum, because if one believed in democracy in, you know, in its best form, that actually is nowhere implemented. So democracy in an ideal version doesn't exist. But if it could, it would be better to be able to survey more people for input into those types of decisions. Unfortunately, there's not enough people who spend enough time educating themselves on all the aspects for what it would take in order to build an ethical and, you know, really great system of AI or singularity or what have you. And so it's you cannot actually rely on, say, the general public or the masses to make good decisions based on that, and not because they're bad, but just because everybody doesn't have enough information to make an informed decision. I would say that's the problem with democracy as a whole. People who vote don't actually make informed decisions for the most part. And so this is the issue. So then what ends up happening is people who do have the money and the knowledge are ultimately the ones who end up making those decisions. And so it again, it boils down to who's got the power to do it and who has the education to do it, and that's how it'll go. So I don't know who those people will be ultimately, but anyone who's, you have to be in this sphere. Like, it's one who doesn't understand deep learning and machine learning and data and computer science and how all of these things really work. And I'm not that person either. I cannot claim these are, I absorb a lot of information, but I can't program myself. But so I wouldn't be one who could make an informed decision. I can give opinions like, yes, please make them moral, but beyond that, you know, how does one do that? I have no idea. And so it's those people that will ultimately, there's no other way. You can't ask people how to do things that they don't know how to do it.
Still, I wonder, like in an ideal world, from your perspective, less of who's making those decisions now, but from your perspective, with your background, and you have an eclectic background, and perhaps have a very different view on reality and the importance of what needs to happen in the future than people who don't have this type of broad background and are more experts in one particular field. But from your personal perspective, in an ideal world, who should make the decisions how it goes forth with artificial intelligence and basically the future of humanity, if you want to say?
Well, I mean, it'll sound a bit elitist, but I do think that you need a mix of backgrounds and a mix of people who think about ethics and people who think about philosophy and people who are well read and people who are, you don't necessarily have to have a PhD, but people who understand and think about humanity. Like, you have to be interested in forwarding humanity and sort of in that sphere. So if you want to just call them, like, say, philosophers, not classical philosophers, but just people who philosophize and who think about these big things. So big thinkers, plus the people who actually can execute. So you need to have people who have grand visions and can actually together collaborate and envision what a world could be like. And not everybody can do that. And then you also need groups of people who actually can execute on that. And when you are having those types of discussions with people, then you know what can be done and what can be done. As far as people who are just funding the project, they should have no decision making unless they are one of these two groups. Shouldn't be anybody political unless you fall into one of these two groups. Like, it needs to be, yeah, visionaries and experts, a mix from everywhere. It doesn't really matter what country you're from or what religion you're from. If you fall into those two camps, like, I can't think of anybody else who would be able to do that well. When you're thinking about, you have to sort of have a humanities point of view, understanding all the different sociological, anthropological, policy, cultural, like, you have to be able to think about all of these things, sort of all the impacts. Yeah. I don't know what group you could call these. I have no idea how you would fix the criteria, but yeah, it's big thinkers, basically.
Okay, I would really like to go into the other topic, the book you're writing, and basically the topic behind, which is sex and business. Is that also the title of the book?
That is the title, yeah.
So would you like to give us some background, elaborate on this book, also why you are writing it, what your perspective is, what your vision is?
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, it started out as my reaction to the Me Too movement, and my reaction was that I was finding that, so there's real sort of sexual violence, sexual harassment that's happening over on sort of this side of things, which is super important to address. People need to speak up. People need to be prosecuted. Like, all of this is extremely important. At the same time, there's other sort of stuff over here that sort of bumps up against, so it looks like it, but it's not it. That maybe is like, I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak. Biology is it's there. It's not going anywhere. People will still meet and like each other. We spend a lot of time at work and with business colleagues. So that's going to happen. I don't think that it's the role of the workplace to write policy out against that. I take issue with some of the reactions that happened because of it, because so people started to get scared. Okay, well, I don't want to have a meeting alone with a woman, because what if something gets said and misinterpreted and then I get in trouble and I'm fired? And so, having a third party present in a meeting. Now, if you and I are going on a business trip, we're not supposed to sit beside each other on the airplane. We can't go for dinner because of whatever. And I'm just adamantly against all of that, because for me, this impedes my relationship building. So I need to be able to go for dinner or for drinks, or if I need to travel with people, I don't want to be impeded by any of that. I'm an adult. I can make my own decisions. If somebody is flirting with me and I don't like it, I have no problem to fix that situation. I've never encountered any situation that I couldn't deal with effectively. At the same time, when you are flirting and when you are discussing with people, there's something that happens. Like, so there's something nice that happens. Sometimes if there's a bit of an attraction, then that's like an energy that you can channel. And so I think that that's a lost opportunity, where you can take that, and there's like, I think it's called a sexual transmutation, where you can actually take all of that sexual energy you have and like channel it into being more creative and having more energy and motivation. And so you can, like I said, it's a flow trigger, so you can get that report written and blasted out quicker than before. And so there's lots of neurochemicals that can get ignited when you either are, even just from flirting or all the way to having sex, all the neurochemicals. So there's like, different types of neurochemicals that get firing in the brain that are a really beautiful thing. And I don't think that people should avoid that. It can help you build your business. It can help you be more creative. I'm talking about also different types of groups, like when I'm talking about feminism, and I bring in all this sort of the infighting within feminism, just to draw people to the point that it's really not necessarily about men versus women. It's not this gender versus that gender, because within feminism, there's plenty of fighting going on. They don't all agree on what's important and the thing to do either. And with men too, I've had hundreds of conversations with guys, and there's plenty of competition and fighting within males as well. There's a lot of males who struggle with their identity, especially these days, where, okay, so if I'm not the breadwinner anymore, what does that mean for my masculinity? If I can't be aggressive and I can't be assertive, then I don't know what it means to be a man anymore. And so they've got their own stuff. So it's not like it's a solid group of men and a solid group of women, and we're like fighting for power. And then I talk about power as well. A lot of the dynamics there about controlling the conversation, and how, sex has become more academic in the conversation than anything else. And so that's why there's a lot of talk about different identities and pronouns and things like that. And so it's controlled in a very academic way. And yet, Pornhub is the number one visited website in the world. Like, there's the sheer amount of money that gets spent on sex is indicative to the level of importance. And yet, it's somehow like we're trying to like get that out of the workplace, get that out of business. It's like, I don't see how that's even possible. Yeah, so I'm talking a lot about different things about negotiation, and how that sort of goes down historically between men and women, and how women can, and I encourage them to be like, if you want to be a feminine woman and wear a skirt and flirt and whatever, like, then do that. And if you want to be that woman that wears a suit and acts like a man, like, do that. It really boils down to choice. Like, do what you want to do. And as long as we're all making, adult decisions, then, and dealing with things in a rational way, then I think most of those issues will be solved. I also think that power is not owned by men. Men just happen to grab it. It's there for everyone to take. And I think that women sort of, there's like this self-talk about society tells women, oh, well, you're not confident. Oh, therefore they start acting like not confident. And I've had people come out, oh, Bobbi, well, that's easy for you to say you're confident. I'm not. Like, well, you're not because you say you're not. And that has nothing to do with your gender and everything to do with your personality. And so that's your mindset. It's not, you can blame your gender, but if I am and you're not, then that just destroys the whole gender thing right there. And then so people are like, okay, well, you're tall and you're blonde, so it's easy for you. I'm like, hey, no, because there's some stereotypes about blonde people that's still there, which I don't care. Like, people can think that, go right ahead. As soon as you're going to talk to me, you're going to figure out I'm not that stupid. But it's like there's someone for everyone. So, there's a whole bunch of people who think everybody loves all kinds of people. So there's always going to be someone who desires you. So, don't worry about that. There's someone for everyone. And it really, I mean, I know a lot of people that maybe aren't, what do you call it, the beauty standard that a magazine would consider, but I see them and I just think that they are so incredibly gorgeous and they have a personality that kind of like, so you just love them. So it really has very little to do with these false standards of beauty that different types of industries portray. It's more about the people. Yeah, so it's ultimately about like, let's just get real. It's a real get real, kind of a slap in the face. I'm criticizing women, I'm criticizing men, I'm telling women they're great, I'm telling men they're great. It's like, here's all the great things, and let's just like get over ourselves and all of this kind of stuff without, again, it's still take seriously these issues over here, the real lawbreakers. That's a different, I'm not talking about that kind of stuff. And just the gray thinking that I can think two things at once. Nothing's binary. You don't need to, your identity can be flexible. Don't let it restrict you, stuff like that. So that's basically what the book's about. And
Okay,
I hope that a whole bunch of people like it and then a whole bunch of people hate it, because the idea is, well, there's going to be a lot of people who really won't like a lot of things that I'm saying, and that's okay, because it's I'm not a PhD, I'm not a sexologist. I have an opinion, and I hope that it sparks conversation, if nothing else. Just change the narrative of the conversation right now, because it's very much taken over by just like, I don't want people to be walking on eggshells anymore. Like, oh, so pre-COVID, let's just step back. Pre-COVID, if we're in the same room, if you touch my arm or if you say something about what I'm wearing, are you going to get in trouble? Like, I just want all of that to just be like, okay, get over it already. If you want to compliment me, go right ahead. If you don't, that's okay too. If you ask me out, I can say no. It's okay. Like, and then we can continue on. We don't need to make a thing out of everything. There's bigger fish to fry.
so basically the way I understand it is that you write about sex in life, basically, with the focus on business, but about sex in life, what it means, which role it has, without all the taboo around it.
Yeah.
You talk about male abuse and or how it from a position of male abuse maybe now shifts to a position of female abuse. Do I understand it correctly?
Well, I'm not using the word abuse, but it's there's definitely a power shift as far as controlling the narrative, and what I consider it to be like three camps of people. So there's, say, the women and men who are talking about the issues that are really salient, that are really real, the sexual harassment, sexual violence, all of this is a real thing. Then there's the people in the middle who are misinterpreting or just overblowing certain things, like, oh my God, he put his hand on my knee and I didn't know what to do, and when you could have just dealt with that and it might not turn into anything. And if that guy happens to ask out every woman that he has a meeting with. I mean, yeah, that guy's got a problem, but
Maybe he just likes you in
it
particular.
could be, or
Yeah.
maybe people also, maybe he's got an issue himself. Like he feels lonely, he feels something that you don't know about, and he's not going about dealing with his issues in the right way, but that doesn't make him a criminal. You know what I mean? And so it's there's some stuff that's in the middle. It's a little bit messy. I'm not saying that there's like a silver bullet fix to this, but I feel like those situations are not the same at level. Can probably be dealt with better a one-on-one locally, and you don't need to ruin each other's lives and make a big public thing about it necessarily. And then there's unfortunately another third. Okay, these aren't exact numbers, but there's another section of I would say women that are playing the card when they shouldn't, when they've misinterpreted a situation, such as I have a male colleague, he got the raise, I didn't, he got it because he's a man, and I didn't get it because I'm a woman, when in fact you could be just incompetent. Like that is a possibility. And so it's and then they play the card when they don't know for sure that that's really the issue, and or they know it's not that, but they're playing the card anyways because it's powerful. And it's that group of people that actually ruin it for the people over here that are really trying to do real things. And so I'm talking about all of that. So men do their own side of the abuse, which is they are abusing their power for the purpose of achieving sex. And there's also women abusing now this power as a way to, to do whatever. So there's some of that going on. I wouldn't say there's a lot of it, but there's too much of it, I guess you could say. And again, it's just people are just a bit scared and on eggshells. And I think if we just talk out some of this stuff a little bit better, then we can sort of get more clarity. And
So, if I understand it correctly, basically you're talking about a healthy way to deal with sex in business and what sex means in a non-taboo way.
Yeah.
And which role it has in our life, and through that automatically in business, outside of abusing the topic. Not necessarily the other person, but the topic in one way or the other.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So it's approaches.
Yes.
How we're approaching this. Yeah.
Yeah, sounds very interesting.
Will be.
So when will it be published?
Well, it's at the editor right now. The goal is soon.
Which paradigms do you feel like, think, and would like to see to be challenged in your fields of expertise for humanity in general? However you would like to go forth.
Yeah, that's a big question. I guess it would be a mix of a capitalist point of view, like what I see as a problem with, I guess, Western society right now is that everybody thinks that they're entitled to be super successful and have lots of money, and that everyone has the ability and the opportunity to do that, which actually leads to a lot of frustration and stress. And so having this sort of ideal on the plate, we're sort of, I guess, raised a bit, at least my generation was, to think, well, you have all the opportunities in the world, you can do anything you want, et cetera, et cetera. When in fact, globally, that's just not possible. And it's also unlikely, because if everybody could have all this money and have all of this, whatever you define as success, that's not how humanity seems to work. Everyone can't be on this level. It seems like we are vertically operating. When you think about even, the animal kingdom, or how we classify plants and all of our biology, it's all very much a vertical classification. So despite the fact that everyone wants to believe that we can all be all of this, I'm not so sure that that's achievable or even like a good idea. And so then you leave people unsatisfied with a simple life. Like if someone just wants to do just this, they're kind of made to feel like, well, that's not okay, because you're not achieving your maximum potential, and you could do all of this. I mean, I think even the same thing happens in religion. There's everything from someone who just very almost never does participate in their religion, all the way up to the most pious, your Sufi, your monks, everything. And like that, you should be always striving towards the ultimate of enlightenment. And if you're not, you're somehow like a bad Christian or a bad Muslim or whatever. And so there's sort of like this weird shaming thing where it's like, can we not just find a way to be okay with where we're at? And so I fault capitalism ultimately, although there's really no other like financial paradigm that I could think of that would work well for all of humanity. We've tried socialism, but I think there's too much greed in humans in order to actually achieve that in any kind of idealistic type of way. Like there's no utopia, and I'm wondering if people could get okay with that. And then social media also doesn't help with all of these types of stories and posts and everything. Everyone just, it's a big bragging session of here's all the great stuff I do. Either that, or it's a dumping ground where people are telling everybody everything about their depression and everything. And it's like, I'm not sure that that's such a good thing. So I mean, I don't have a solid answer for your question, but maybe, I mean, capitalism isn't working. Like in the long run, it's just going to keep causing problems. So a financial paradigm shift definitely needs to happen. And then I think by nature, the environmental paradigm will shift along with that, because those two things are super connected. We're overpopulated in most areas. There's too much of a difference in equity. It very rich, very poor, lots of poor people. There's really no reason for it other than people just want to keep their money, right? So that's a big question. I would start with capitalism. That would be the first thing to start with. It's social. I hope that this social media stuff is a phase. I don't think social media as in its current state is very helpful to society. I would love to see some type of that's something that could immediately happen. I mean, it's really relatively new, and so it could potentially disappear just as quick. But it's, as the way that it's formed right now, I think it's really detrimental to people. I don't know. What's your thought on that?
Social media in particular, or everything you say?
Well, okay, everything, but social media in particular.
Well, I think how social media is developing is definitely not healthy in various aspects. Well, similar as you said, at the one hand you have a lot of people dumping a lot of things, at the other hand you have a lot of people just showing off. And in any case, it is to a big extent very superficial, showing a very superficial life within social media bubbles, like perhaps also in real life. There is a true potential of course, connecting in different ways with people. But when we look at social media, how old is it now? It's like 15 years approximately. So when we look at how things evolve and cultures evolve, it's very young, at a very young stage. And I'm pretty sure that at the stage when it's 50, that it will be very different in many respects. So I think it can develop in a good way. But at the moment, really, I think also when it comes to communication, to politics, to the spread of fake news, for example, a lot of hatred, a lot of misinformation, and so on and so forth, that's a major problem. It's a big problem. So that's all the negative part. But the basic possibilities through social media, I think they are good.
Yeah. I mean, we wouldn't be talking right now if it wasn't for social media.
Exactly.
Yeah. So it definitely has human beings tend to not, I wish they use things more for good than for evil, kind of, so to speak.
Exactly.
Yeah.
When it comes to our current economic system, I personally think that there's a reason why we have had this system until now. Capitalism, from my perspective, has been created in a time when there were no corporations. So the rules that have been defined, the ideas that have been defined for capitalism were when one grocery store was competing with another grocery store, not organic store around the corner with Walmart, for example.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and this is the situation we're having right now. As you said, there's a direct connection also to the environment and what's going on in the environment. I personally think that the paradigm of profit maximization has to, and potentially with the crisis that's coming up, might be challenged by a paradigm where it's about creating purpose in life. There is a true chance. I believe there is potentially, my perspective really is if we make it through this crisis with a system change in many respects, and one of it is capitalism, not because it is bad, but it's just not the system anymore. It's 200 years old, and it's not the system anymore that's suitable for our current times and the future. So I think what this crisis that I believe is coming up, if it hits us hard enough, and if we are forced to make major changes, then we have a true chance to actually transcend to a next level of humanity. And that would include the operating system that our world is run by, and this is basically our economy. And capitalism is not the system that is, from my perspective, is not the system that is suitable in the world with these environmental problems that we have, and not suitable for a world with exponential technologies that we have right now, and the direction it's heading.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah,
Let's
that's
see.
true.
Let's see.
I've seen a lot of over the last, I'd say, 5 years, what's called impact investing. So, and investors are changing their minds on the types of things that they're investing in, where it's not just about the return anymore. And so I see that growing. Social innovation, social entrepreneurship, I see that growing a lot. So that's definitely good news. And this is why I'm involved in those types of projects, because that's the kind of thing that I want to move forward.
I would like to ask you a final question, and it is exactly connected to what you also just said right now. When you see yourself as a wise old woman in a few decades from now and look back to your life, which impact would your life have had on humanity with your life, with what you have done?
I want to have been instrumental in bringing forth some technologies that change the world. Like I want people to, I don't necessarily need to get into any books or any kind of like permanent monument or anything like that. That's not something. But I would like people to sort of look back and say, you know what, if I never met Bobbi, this never would have happened. And I would like a lot of people to be able to say, if I never met her, I would never have been able to do that. So that's the type of, just amongst people, not anywhere, permanent, but amongst people, I would like people to be able to say that.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you for sharing. Thank you for your time,
pleasure.
and I wish you a good day.
Thank you. You as well.
Thank you for staying tuned for this edition of Challenging ParadigmX. If you like this episode with Bobbi Bidochka, feel free to share it with your community so Bobbi's message gets spread even further. Also, please hit subscribe, rate the episode, and I'd be glad about a review. If you like my podcast, you can support it through Patreon. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to contact me. Next week we're up with Nathalie Riviere. Amongst other things, we'll talk about communication and marketing. So until then, I wish you a great week and say ciao.